I had to laugh as I listened to that song that it is one of my favorite parts of the week is to listen to the different songs and choose one. Everybody always comments if it's too country or too this or that. The one I was going to pick was like a reggae Caribbean, but I decided on this one. So, and good times. So this week is Ask Father Week. So at the end of my sessions, you always see the Ask Father piece, and you can email the address, and you're welcome to continue to do that. But now I have 5 questions, and so we're going to take one each day. I'm going to try and squeeze it into 5 minutes too. But today is the biggest one. Confession. How can I go to confession if I can't go to confession? Well, that's a good question. And the question underneath it is, how can I receive God's forgiveness as a Catholic without confession? How do I receive those graces? So what do we know? We know that, for example, in our sacramental life in general, that we can always, with venial sins, any sacrament, any sacramental can be something that will wipe those away because it's a contrite heart coming to God, and there's a way to make it self-manifest, to make it sacramental. So I can stick my hands into the holy water, make the sign of the cross, in which I'm saved, and then say, Lord, I'm sorry for my sins, and those sins are wiped away in that moment, that being contrite of heart, taking it to God. Now, mortal sins. Now we say the difference. So venial sins, 1 John, not all sins cause death. Mortal sins, okay, or not all sins are mortal, I guess he says. A mortal sin, we have those, remember those 3 pieces. 1, it's grave. It's an important thing. So let's take killing somebody. Killing somebody in itself is a big deal. 2, I know it's a big deal. Knowing it is grave, and I know it's grave. And the third part is, I decide to do it anyway. So killing is bad. I know it's bad. And I'm decided I'm going to do it anyway because that person drives me crazy. Mortal sin. So the church says, okay, if that's the case, you need to come in. We need to talk about it. More guidance is needed. More healing, spiritual doctor stuff is needed. And so that is where we have this hamartiology, as they would say in the fancy words, the study of sin. And so that's what we know. And so the question is, if I have these mortal sins, I need to go to confession, and I can't go to confession, what do I do? And this is where, it's kind of funny, the solidarity of it all comes into play. It's funny, as I live here with these guys that I live with, the experiences are very unique. One ministered long time in South America in remote communities. One was born in a remote community in the Philippines. I lived, for 3 years in different remote communities that didn't have access to priests all the time. And so in this time where we are used to the ordinary means of grace, to the ordinary ways of God's grace coming to us, we are now having to adjust to extraordinary means. So for example, in these places where other people around the world are living and they don't have access to a priest pretty much every once in a while. And so how do they live with their sins? What are the ways in which grace comes to them? And so the church gives us, it says, listen, and I'll post these at the end, but it comes from both canon law, which helps govern the church, and then the catechism, which helps inform and teach the church. And between the two, I summarize that, if we're aware of grave sins, that we should go to confession. But if we don't have access to confession, then we are called to make a perfect act of contrition, which involves also going to confession in a sacramental way at our next opportune moment. And so that comes from Canon Law 916, and I'll post that later. And then the 1452 in the Catechism, if you want to read that part, that begins to tell us the difference between a perfect act of contrition and an imperfect act of contrition. So, imperfect is, take it in the way of parents. So, I lie to my parents, and they're going to beat the tar out of me. And so, out of fear, I go and apologize in order to diminish what's about to happen. That is an imperfect act of contrition. I'm contrite of heart, but my reason is out of fear. A perfect act of contrition is, my parents only love me and have my best interests at heart, and I love them, and I messed up, and that's stupid. And so I go and make my ask of forgiveness for that reason. That is a perfect act of contrition. And we should do the same with God our Father. I love him, and he provides for me, and I should not have done that, and I ask forgiveness. In the moment that it happens, I don't wait. I don't say, oh, the sin of presumption, oh, it happened, and now I hit the spiral of sin because I got to go to confession anyway. No, the saints are not those who never fell. The saints are the ones who got back up every time afterwards. So we are called to ask for forgiveness and get back on our horse and keep going. So you have a few things there. The ordinary means of grace, The ordinary means are the sacraments. That's where I go for my grace fill. When they are unavailable to me, then I shift to the extraordinary, the extraordinary means of grace. God is not bound by the sacraments. He is not put in a box. He can act where he wishes and wills. And so in these times when we are unable to enter into sacrament, he now lets his extraordinary graces be enough. And the church says, make a perfect act of contrition. And then at your first opportune moment, be sure to head back to the confessional to be guided on these pieces. So hopefully some of that was a help here and there of how the church looks at this. And hopefully soon one day we'll be back in the confessional and be able to move forward in an ordinary way. But in the meantime, there are plenty of options available to us. So let's hunker down and work on those spiritual lives. Be here tomorrow, 5 o'clock, for question number 2.